My name is Alex Reynolds, and we're going to walk through today how to actually use the docs in ModelSpace. So the docs are one of the most powerful tools that we have, and something that we're frankly very proud of in terms of the amount of effort that we've put into them, and hopefully the quality of research that they're going to be. But before I show them, a note, which is we live with this every day, so we know what how to use the sim, but what we don't know is what's not clear. And so if you're using the docs, you're new to the sim, please give us feedback. We want to make these as good as we can. And even if something's not clear to you, we'll answer your question immediately. But then we can update the docs so that they're better for the next person. This really is a collaborative effort. We're trying to build a community here. And so anything that's not clear, let us know and we'll get it fixed. So let's start with how to build the docs. So let's say that we're at the top level of our directory, ModelSpace release. So we're going to cd into build, and then you can run the command make docs. I'm not going to run it here because it takes a while, but essentially it's just that simple. So what that's going to do is it's going to build the documents, and it's going to produce them in the build directory. So if you go to build docs, and then you look for main.html, and it's this one right here. That's going to be the HTML file because our documents are built as linked web pages to make them super easy to use. That is actually going to have the docs for you. Our goal is that soon we'll be able to post these somewhere where they're just available online as like a website. But we're not there yet. And so right now you've got them locally, right? So if you are using VS Code, which we highly recommend, especially if you're in a container, you should have the extension live server already installed because we've installed it for you. If not, you can install it really easily, and you can right click main and you can open with live server. And what that's going to do is it's going to take you to our documentation landing page. So this landing page is kind of everything you need to know. It's your one-stop shop. It is your starting point for working with ModelSpace. So if you're ever not sure how to do something, I highly recommend that you come here and use this as your starting point for how to work with the sim. So the docs are basically broken down into 3 sections. The first section is help and info. So within that, we have our release notes. So you can see there, this is what came out in the latest version of ModelSpace 24.05. We added Google Earth. We added, some improvements to some of our logging. We added a lot of capabilities, and we added a lot of models. And then we'll also have limitations. We try to keep these as up to date as possible, but if you find something that you think should be, better than it is, let us know. We'll get it fixed, or, at a minimum, we'll have a plan to fix it. So that's release notes. We have a link to the Addicts YouTube from the docs. So again, a great starting point because you can get right back here from the docs. The ModelSpace Doxygen, which is something that's built automatically. And that from that, you can see all of the documentation that comes from all of our classes. And this looks like a lot. But it's not that bad. And so here's the spacecraft, right? If you want to see how to interact with the spacecraft, this is all the stuff you can do to interact with the spacecraft. Especially the function documentation. This is super helpful. Every function comes documented with how do you actually use it, so that you can use it really easily in the simulation. Okay, so leaving the Doxygen, there's a link to our Stack Overflow. This is a great place to put questions. It's also a great place to check to see if someone in the Addicts community has also asked a question. It's probably been asked. And then, of course, there's a help email address. We recommend you text us or send an email to an individual person on the team. But if you're not, you can email help@addictsengineering.com, which actually just goes right to my inbox. And then I'll be able to get you an answer really quickly. The next section of the documentation is how-tos, and that's broken into 3 sections. How do I use, where do I find, and how do I do? And so let's start with the last 2. So where do I find? This tells you where to find C++ source code, information on that, scripts, essentially everything that was said in the YouTube video on how to navigate ModelSpace is now written here. And where do I find? How do I do? Some very simple documentation on how to do things that you would want to do in the sim. And of course, let us know what else you need to know how to do, and we'll make sure to get it added to the docs. But the really good thing is, how do I use? So there are a lot of things that come with ModelSpace. The matrices, models, our frame class. We talk about all these things, the simulation executive, as things that you can work with. But how do you actually know how to work with them and what functions are available, especially if you don't want to dive through source code? The easiest way is right here in the how-tos section. So if I click on the matrix class, so what it is it's a a description of this is what the class does, this is how it works, here are naming conventions, here's how to interact with it, and then a bunch of examples on all the functions that you can use for this class with C++ and Python examples. So if I want to create a matrix, I can see how to do that. If I want to set and get values, I can see how to do that. Matrix operations, additional operations on the matrix, and then the math functions. So how do I actually do math with matrices, things like that. Logging, really good examples of how to set up logging so that you can log information. The simulation executive, how do I work with the simulation executive? All of this is right here in a table that has examples on how to actually work with everything. And so that's a really great resource. And then the last thing to note are the tutorials and examples. So those are broken down into a matrix that kind of scales from least complex to most complex. We're still in the process of filling it out as of this video's publishing, but basically it has a description of what the scenario is, the example code and where you can find it, documentation on it, and then some notes that we compile. So something we try to do with our first-time users is have them compile notes, and then we publish them here into the sim so that they're available for the next person. Hey, I learned this wasn't clear. But the documentation itself also talks through, here's how you build a sim. And this is a C++ example. We're constantly putting out these examples, but this is a really good starting point for, hey, I want to work with stuff. Where do I find it? How do I do it? Here's a great starting point. So the docs are a great resource. The other thing is, how do you build your own docs? So if I cd into my ModelSpace, Python scripts, tutorials, simple gravity, let's use live plot. What we're going to do here is we're going to actually run a simulation. So the live plot, this example is again, like a 10-liner example, like the other thing that we showed on how to sort of build a script. So this is kind of the easiest form of documentation. That plot can also be created as a plot. But the big thing is the analysis script. So if I do Python 3 analysis.py, oops, do I not have one here? Let's go to simple gravity spacecraft. So here I'm going to run an analysis script and show you how to automate some documentation. So this is the script right here. There's this feature called AutoDoc that lets you build a document. So here's a title, author, and the file. And then all I'm doing is I'm creating plots. This is just creating normal plots like you would in MATLAB. And then I'm calling add to, add this to my plot. So I'm going to add it here. I'm going to add it here. And what that's doing is it's automatically building an analysis document that can show, everything that's going on. So if I do Python 3 and I already ran everything, my analysis.py, this one's actually a fun one because it also opens Google Earth. So you can see everything in Google Earth, except unfortunately, it looks like I didn't actually run any data. But what this will do is it will produce a trajectory overlay of everything on top of Google Earth. So that's a really useful tool, especially if you're doing anything related to like EDL, but even if you're just doing an orbit to see where your orbit is, or a ground track. What is our ground station contact? When are we passing over exclusion zones? Things like that. It's a really great tool for that. But from my analysis, I'm going to open. My analysis script will produce as a result an ASCII doc, which is this file that has .adoc in it. And you look at it and you're like, that's not very easy to work with. But with these docs that are produced from results of sims, if I do Control-Shift-V, I can see all of my analysis results immediately out of my sim. And what that lets you do is really quickly iterate, because I just ran my sim, now I ran analysis, and now I can instantly see the output. I don't have to move it to PowerPoint. I don't have to go, create some plots. I can instantly see my docs right there. So that's pretty much how to work with the docs. This can be used for a lot, and there's a lot of power to it, but that is the intro to how to use the docs. Thanks, everyone.